Hi there, I'm Christine, and this is the Freedom Update, the bi-weekly video podcast from the Canadian Constitution Foundation, where we talk about our ongoing cases, give you updates on interesting constitutional issues from across Canada, and talk about our upcoming events. Thanks for joining us, and let's talk about freedom. This week, our case update is a little bit of a wait-and-see update because we're not quite ready to announce a case yet. But behind the scenes, we're working extremely hard on really important civil liberties challenges related to Ontario's stay-at-home order. While we can't announce our case yet, I'll explain some of the concerns we have about the stay-at-home order. The stay-at-home order in Ontario came into effect at midnight on January 15th. The order requires everyone to stay in their homes unless they need to leave for an essential reason. There are 29 permitted reasons to leave your home, which are all set out in a regulation. Now, there's a popular maxim in common law systems: everything which is not forbidden is permitted. In liberal democracies, we're inherently and naturally free to do anything, so long as it's not expressly prohibited by law. But Ontario's stay-at-home order has flipped that maxim on its head. Now everything is forbidden unless it's permitted. The problem with this order is that this is just not how we live in a free society. When everything is illegal, we're all criminals. It's just not possible to write a list of all permitted activities. The government said as much in a Q&A document. The Premier's office stated that it's impossible to determine what is an essential item, an essential trip, or an essential job. While the government has defined essential workplaces, it just isn't possible to review the millions of different job descriptions at those workplaces to determine who could actually work from home. Yet despite recognizing the sheer impossibility of imposing a blanket prohibition on everything and then carving out the activities we're still free to do, that's exactly what Premier Ford has done. And recognizing the absurdity of the government being able to make these determinations, Premier Ford asked residents to use their best judgment in deciding whether to go out. We should all be concerned about what will happen when police and individuals disagree about what is truly essential under the stay-at-home order. While the government has clarified that police will not pull cars over solely to check if drivers are complying with the stay-at-home order, it's fair to expect that many a driver with a broken taillight will be probed about their reasons for being out and about. We know that random street checks, even when done under the pretense of a broken taillight, have a disproportionate impact on minority communities. Increasing the number of police interactions and empowering the police to demand identification when enforcing a largely subjective law is a recipe for arbitrary detentions, searches, and escalations. Most damaging of all, it creates a culture of fear and mistrust. The government has gone too far. While some health measures are justified and warranted, the Ford government's using a sledgehammer. That's why we're working on our case to push back, to ensure governments get the balance right. While I can't announce the details of the case yet, I'll have more to say in the next few days. We'll be sure to keep you updated through this video update and through our mailing list, which you can sign up for at www.theccf.ca. We'll also put out a news release the day our case becomes public, so be sure to keep watching our social media pages. There are some interesting constitutional updates from across Canada, and this week we're checking in with the federal government, which is now making final revisions to plans to regulate social media. The Globe and Mail has reported that the federal government is making its final changes to legislation to regulate social media platforms. The new laws are being presented to Cabinet and, if approved, could be introduced to Parliament as early as February. The federal government has been discussing regulating social media since 2019, when the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights released a report called Taking Action to End Online Hate. But the recent riots on Capitol Hill and the reactions of web giants like Facebook, Google, Twitter, Apple, and Amazon have caused renewed interest in the regulation of online hate. What responsibility do web giants have to moderate their sites? What is the proper role for government regulation? We don't know yet what the final proposed legislation will include, but the 2019 report to Parliament made some recommendations. And there are two significant things that we are looking for that may be included in the new law that we have some concerns about. The first is the potential for a 24-hour takedown requirement for platforms. And the second is the reintroduction of a civil remedy for hate speech. We have a lot of concerns about both. First, the 24-hour takedown requirement could require platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, or Google to remove hate content within 24 hours or face significant penalties. Platforms already monitor their own content using terms of service, and as we've seen, they're willing to enforce those terms of service. For example, Facebook and Twitter have both deactivated the accounts of now former President Trump. But the Canadian Heritage Minister has a mandate letter now to create his own regulations, including a takedown requirement. While nothing's enforced yet or has been formally proposed, there are a lot of freedom of expression problems raised by the 24-hour takedown requirement that's being contemplated. This would be a limit on expression, and it would be using an undefined term, hate. The problem is that this could create a chilling effect. Will platforms seeking to avoid a penalty preemptively take down all kinds of content that doesn't actually meet any threshold? In our view, it's better to leave the platforms to control their own content than have the government policing content using an undefined and subjective term like hate. The second thing we're looking at to see if the new legislation includes a civil remedy for hate speech. This would allow individuals to report online hate speech to a government commission like the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and the complainant could be awarded compensation. The complainant doesn't bear the cost of starting a claim, but the defendant bears the cost of defending themselves. Canada used to have this type of process, the former Section 13 of the Canada Human Rights Act. It was repealed by the Harper government because many viewed this provision as having become highly politicized. They believed it was being used to launch trivial complaints to enforce political correctness. There were also accusations that Section 13 had a selective enforcement process. Some hate speech would be investigated and penalized, but other similar speech would be ignored. That's an inherent problem with hate speech laws because hate is an undefinable term, and it's often treated subjectively. Section 13 of the Canada Human Rights Act was repealed in part because it's a form of censorship, and government censorship should be confined to an extremely narrow category, for example, threats of violence against identifiable groups. Section 13 dealt with a form of group defamation, of which there's a lot. In deciding to repeal that section, the government commissioned an expert report, and the expert report concluded that it's just not practical to deal with group defamation through censorship because there's just too much of it. That was true 10 years ago, and with the rise of social media, it's even more true today. Yet the Trudeau government seems to be considering reintroducing a similar provision. The government isn't suddenly able to achieve things today that were impossible 10 years ago, when things are actually even harder now. We'll be monitoring to see if the proposal to reinstate a civil remedy is included in the legislation and what the 24-hour takedown proposal will look like. We'll be sure to keep you updated, subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch our video updates, or join our mailing list at www.theccf.ca. I have some exciting events to tell you about, and I hope that you'll be able to join me. The first is a forum I'll be moderating, put on by our friends at the Canada Strong and Free Network. The topic will be pushing back against the Great Reset. The panel includes Rex Murphy, Anthony Fury, and Peter Foster. The forum will take place online and is free for anyone. It will take place on January 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'll share the link to register in the video description, so please join us. I'm also going to be hosting some episodes of Canadian Justice, which is a new television show on the channel The News Forum, carried by Bell. Episodes air on weeknights at 8 p.m., and we're going to be doing a show about censorship, and we often address COVID-19 issues. Please tune in and watch. That's all for this update. Thanks for tuning in, and let's keep fighting for freedom in Canada.